Real family welcomes you in. But what happens when your own family shuts you out? If that question has ever crossed your mind, subscribe now and hear how this story ends. I was sitting at my kitchen table when the phone buzzed. The sound was soft, almost timid yet sharp enough to slice through the silence of the house like a knife. The clock on the wall, hanging beside the fridge, read 9:47 p.m. I remember the time because I had just closed my suitcase, checked for the 10th time the little souvenirs I had bought for my grandkids, and written down one more list of things not to forget. It was the night before the cruise, a cruise I had dreamed of, planned, and paid for with my own hands over the past 3 years. My name is Marilyn Rose Monroe. I'm 62 years old, a retired teacher, a widow for 10 years, and a mother. My life has never been about excess. I live in a modest house, with a small backyard where I planted a lemon tree with my husband James. He left too soon, but before he passed, he left me with a promise to always keep reaching for bigger horizons. I was never one to spend on myself. I've always been one of those women who take care of everyone else first, the kind who feels happiness in her children's smiles, even when her own heart is breaking. But over time, I realized my role within my own family had changed. I was no longer memory, no longer presence. I was only the bank. When I saw my daughter's name light up on the screen, my heart warmed instantly. I thought it would be a sweet message, maybe one last question about the luggage, or even a picture of the boys already excited about the trip. But what appeared, in cold letters, was something else entirely. Mom, it's just going to be the 4 of us on the cruise. I hope you understand. I read it once, I read it again, and for a few seconds, the world lost its sound. The hum of the refrigerator vanished. The ticking clock on the wall stopped. Even the wind slipping through the half-open window seemed to pause. All I could hear was the uneven beat of my own heart. Stumbling, I set the phone down on the table, as if it had become too heavy to hold. Watched the screen go dark, carrying the words away but leaving the scar behind. I turned my head and saw the calendar pinned to the fridge with a heart-shaped magnet, a Mother's Day gift from the boys. They had written, "Best grandma in the world." And yet, there I was, erased from my daughters. We meant for people, her husband, my 2 grandsons, not me. I was the extra, the weight, the one who didn't fit in the cabin or in the picture. And she asked me to understand. Understand what? That I was no longer family, that my money was welcome, but my presence was not, that my role was to pay, and then disappear. I closed my eyes and remembered a card she made for me when she was 10, handmade, with colored paper and markers. She wrote, "Mom, you're my best friend. When I grow up, I'll take you around the world." I still keep that card in a memory box. Now, staring at this message on my phone, it felt like it had been written by a stranger. I looked around my kitchen. The suitcase stood in the corner, closed, tied with a red ribbon on the handle. Inside were clothes I hadn't worn in years, chosen with care, light dresses, a straw hat, even a blue scarf James always loved. On the table, lined neatly, were little transparent bags. Each held a keychain shaped like an anchor, engraved with the words, "Grandma loves you." I picked up the one meant for Lucas, the youngest. The metal was cold against my trembling hands. If I'm not going, I thought, why did I prepare everything with such love? I took a deep breath and looked at the phrase again. It's just going to be the 4 of us, them. I hope you understand. And I did understand, more than she imagined. But I also knew something she had forgotten. A detail still written in my name. And sooner or later, that detail would speak louder than all their silence. The most painful part wasn't even the message itself. It was its simplicity. No explanation, no sorry, no thank you for everything. If someone asked me when the dream of the cruise began, I wouldn't say it was the day I called the travel agency. Not even the moment my daughter gave me that uncomfortable smile when I revealed the surprise. No, the dream started earlier. Much earlier. It started with a glass jar, thick, transparent, with a metal lid already rusted at the edges. I found it by accident, in the back of a cabinet, while cleaning the kitchen after retirement, one of those old jars my mother used to keep beans in. That day, staring at it, I had an idea, almost childish. I took a $10 bill, folded it into quarters, and slipped it inside. The dry sound of the lid closing echoed in the silent kitchen. And That was the birth of what I would come to call my dream jar. At first, it was only coins, nickels, quarters, sometimes $1 left from grocery shopping. I would drop them in and shake the jar, just to hear the jingling. It was like music, the music of hope. With time, the coins turned into bills. First the smaller ones, then whatever I could save from small sacrifices. Every time I folded a piece of paper money and slid it through the narrow jar opening, it felt like I wasn't just saving cash, I was storing a piece of my will to keep living. I remember the first time I turned down an invitation from my neighbors to go out for lunch. "Money's tight this month," I lied with a smile. The truth is, it wasn't. I had enough. But I wanted to save. While they enjoyed plates at a new restaurant in town, I stayed home with a peanut butter sandwich. But when I slipped the bill, I didn't spend into the jar. I felt warmth in my chest. Another time, at the grocery store, I stood for long minutes staring at the tea shelf. There was a fancy imported box I loved, vanilla aroma, elegant packaging. It was expensive, but I used to gift it to myself. That time, I picked the cheap one. Plain, tasteless tea bags. When I got home, the difference in price went straight into the jar, and with every bland sip of that tea, I reminded myself, it's for the cruise. Of course, it wasn't just for me. There was a promise behind it. James, my husband, and I had always dreamed of going on a cruise. He used to say he wanted to see the sea stretch endlessly, with no land in sight. "It's like staring at eternity," he would say. We never managed to go. First, because there was never enough money. Then, because something urgent always came up. Then came the illness. He passed before we had the chance. At the funeral, holding his cold hand, I whispered, "I'll still go, James, and I'll take everyone with me, you'll see." I don't know if he heard me, but I heard it. And that was enough to turn every coin I dropped into the jar into a prayer. Over time, the sacrifices grew. I turned off the heater earlier in the winter and went to bed wearing 2 pairs of socks, just to save on the energy bill. I patched up clothes instead of buying new ones. I gave night tutoring lessons, even with tired eyes, to earn a few extra dollars. My neighbors saw me turning down invitations and thought I was broke. I never explained. I let them think what they wanted. What they didn't know was that each no was a step closer to the deck of a ship. My grandkids laughing in the wind. My daughter hugging me in gratitude. That's what I saw every time I slipped money into the jar. My grandkids running through the ship's hallway. My daughter smiling while taking pictures. Me, sitting next to her, holding her hand. And, at night, looking at the open sea, whispering to James, "We made it." That vision kept me strong. I vividly remember the first time I dropped a $50 bill inside the jar. I had earned extra pay for reviewing school papers. That day, I skipped the grocery store, walked right past it. When I folded the bill and pushed it through the jar's mouth, I heard the paper mixing with the coins. It was as if the sound itself said, "Now it's serious." But there's something curious about dreams financed by sacrifice. They're never invisible. People notice. My daughter noticed I always said no to outings. My son-in-law noticed I never bought anything new. They saw the savings, but not the purpose. Or maybe they didn't, chose to ignore it, because to them, my effort wasn't a dream. It was an obligation. That's how it is when you love too much. Your giving becomes the background noise of life. Nobody applauds the foundation of a house. Nobody thanks the air they breathe, not until it's gone. And back then, I still believed I was being seen. I thought of myself as the architect of a family dream. But, in truth, I was already just the ATM fueling the trip. Still, every coin brought me closer to embarkation day. I smiled to myself, thinking, it will be worth it. It will bring us together again. Little did I know that when that day came, the only thing united would be the idea that my part ended with the "If I close my eyes, I can still hear his voice." No matter how many years go by, some echoes never fade. James's laugh, for instance, deep, full, the kind that filled an entire room like music. He was the one who taught me to dream of the sea. We were young when we married. No money, but plenty of hope. Our honeymoon was simple. A cheap roadside inn. The bed creaked, the shower leaked. But we were radiant, that first night. Lying on a mattress that smelled faintly of mildew, James looked at me and said, "One day, Marilyn, I'll take you on a ship, one of those big cruises." I laughed, amused at his boldness. "You barely managed to pay the bus fare to get here." He pulled me close and answered, "Dreaming is free. and I'll make it happen. And in that moment, I believed him. Because James was like that when he said something, it felt as though the future itself bent to obey. But the future is demanding. Children came, bills came, unexpected crises arrived right on schedule. The dream of the cruise was pushed aside, always later. One day, he would say, one day, when the kids are grown, one day, when the bills are lighter, and I, patient, guarded that promise like it was a hidden jewel. But time doesn't wait. When James fell ill, we still spoke of travel. He said the ocean had the power to heal that. He wanted to feel the wind on his face, eyes closed, just to believe there were still infinities ahead, that, in the final months, he no longer spoke of journeys, only of rest. I sat by his bed, holding his hand. Fragile now, he looked at me and whispered, I still want to see the horizon, Marilyn, just once. I smiled, but inside my heart bled. I knew that once would never come, and then, he was gone. At the funeral, people offered words of comfort. I heard none of them. My eyes were fixed on his hand, cold, motionless. I leaned in, kissed his fingers, and whispered, I will still go, James. I'll see the horizon for both of us. And I'll take everyone with me, so you'll be there in every laugh, in every toast. It was my promise. And promises made in silence, with tears, weigh the heaviest dot. Every coin I dropped into the jar after that carried two invisible names, mine and his. Every sacrifice was a way to keep him alive. Every act of saving was a vow of fidelity. When I finally booked the cruise, I felt as though part of the promise had been fulfilled. The voyage itself was still ahead. The toast on the deck was still waiting, but I could already imagine him smiling, proud. There was one memory that always returned to me. James and I, still dating, took a worn-out bus to the nearest beach. He had never seen the ocean before. When we got there, we ran barefoot across the sand. He spread his arms wide as if to embrace the whole world and shouted, one day, Marilyn, it won't just be this shoreline, we'll cross it all. I laughed, running after him. It was that spirit that made me believe anything was possible. Now, sitting in the kitchen with my phone turned face down, the promise burned like a wound. I had turned a dream into reality. I had done my part. But the very family that was supposed to be the reason for it all was leaving me behind. It felt as if James had died all over again, this time, taken not by illness, but by indifference. It's strange how promises made to the love of your life can become chains. They pull you, bind you, force you to keep walking, even when others no longer walk beside you. And in that moment, I realized maybe I had used the promise as an excuse. Maybe all the saving, all the sacrifices, weren't just to honor James, but to hold on to a daughter who already saw me as disposable. I sighed, ran my hand over the closed suitcase, over the cold anchor-shaped keychain in my palm, and I thought, no promise obliges me to accept being erased. If James were here, he would have said, don't let them treat you like a burden, and I knew then, my answer would come, silent but firm. My jar was no longer just a jar. Inside that heavy, transparent glass there was more than coins and folded bills. There were extra hours of work, sleepless nights, simple meals, patched clothes, invitations declined. Every cent I saved carried a story. And every time I shook the jar and heard the metallic clink mixed with the rustle of bills, I wasn't hearing money, I was hearing hope. One day, I realized the jar could no longer hold it. The glass was full to the brim. I had to use a shoebox, then another, then a brown envelope, until, for the first time in my life, I went to the bank and opened a separate account. I asked that it be called the Travel Fund. The teller smiled and asked, planning a trip, Mrs. Monroe? Yes, I answered, but not alone. I'm taking my whole family. I walked out of that bank with a feeling almost childlike, as if I had just bought tickets to a show before it even existed. I spent nights in front of the computer, comparing cruises, packages, dates, reading reviews, looking at photos, reading again. I didn't want empty luxury. I wanted warmth. I wanted enough cabins for everyone, food varied enough to please the grandchildren and my son-in-law, activities to keep the kids busy, shows at night, and a big table where we could all sit together. After weeks of research, I found the perfect package. 7 days in the Caribbean, balcony cabins, a pool for the kids, themed dinners, island stops. It was expensive, very expensive, but I had it because I had denied myself almost everything to make it happen. I still remember the day I clicked confirm purchase. My heart raced as if I were getting married again. I typed in the card numbers with trembling hands. When the screen flashed the words reservation confirmed, I closed my eyes and felt tears roll down my cheeks. I had done it. I took James's photo from the living room shelf and whispered softly, "I did it, my love. We're all going. You too." When I told my daughter, she gave me that restrained smile I've already mentioned, but in my mind, I thought it was just surprise. She hasn't realized it yet, I told myself. When we're all together on that ship, she hugged me and said thank you. I clung to that vision like a castaway clings to driftwood. I turned the jar into an invisible altar. Every time I passed by it, I remembered the choices that brought me there. The new dress I didn't buy, the trip with friends I refused, the coffees I didn't drink outside. Each sacrifice was now an anticipated smile of my grandchildren playing on the ship. It's curious. Mothers always learn how to turn absence into abundance. We do magic with little money. We stretch a plate to feed two. We give up one desire to fulfill another. And most of the time, nobody notices. But I noticed. I knew every single choice. And that's why the cruise wasn't just a trip, it was my invisible monument. What I didn't realize was that while I saw a monument, they only saw an ATM, while I marveled at the full jar. They were planning a trip where I was no longer included, and I would only discover that far too late. Today, looking back, I know that jar was never just money, it was my heart in glass, and when they excluded me, it was as if they had turned their backs on everything that jar represented. But back then, I still believed. That night, after the reservation confirmation, I closed my eyes and dreamed I was already on deck, the wind on my face, the children running, my daughter smiling. I believed everything was finally right. Little did I know that months later, that passenger list would no longer have my name. When I booked the cruise, I created a WhatsApp group. The name was simple, Family Cruise 2023. I added my daughter, my son-in-law, and my 2 grandkids who already had phones. The group photo was a big white ship against a bright blue sky. That moment, I felt modern, connected, almost young again. It was supposed to be our space, the place where I imagined we'd plan everything together. At first, I was the most active. I sent pictures of Caribbean food, funny memes about families on cruises, even short videos of people dancing at the themed parties on board. I replied quickly, filled the chat with hearts, used emojis without worrying if I looked silly. I thought I was building excitement, setting the mood, and for a few days, they even reacted, a LOL here, an emoji there, but nothing more. Soon my messages started going unanswered. I shared a tip about special sunscreen for kids. Silence. I posted a link about onboard shows. Silence. I wrote, "Hey, I was thinking of bringing card games for the evenings. What do you think?" No one responded. Hours went by, and the group was still active. My daughter posted a picture of new clothes for the boys. My son-in-law commented, but my message just sat there, invisible. It was the first time I felt a strange sting, like being in a crowded room, speaking out loud, and no one even turning their head. I told myself, maybe they're busy. That was how I tried to console myself. But deep down, the feeling of being ignored lingered. Then, one afternoon, I opened the group and saw a photo, all of them wearing matching white t-shirts with the words, "Family is everything." My daughter wrote, "Surprise, look what I had made." My son-in-law replied with clapping emoji. The boys laughed in the chat. I looked closely and realized the obvious. There was no shirt for me. I typed, "They look great, so, where's mine?" Silence. No answer. No answer. Hours later, my daughter finally responded with a vague message. "Oh, Mom, I didn't think you'd care about that." It was kind of a last-minute thing. I smiled bitterly to myself. It was like they were rehearsing a family photo without me. That moment reminded me of a Christmas years ago. Everyone had agreed to wear red sweaters. I only found out at the dinner itself. I arrived in a blue dress. James always loved that dress. In the family photo, I was the only one out of place. A blue dot in a sea of red. And seeing those cruise t-shirts gave me the same hollow feeling. It didn't take long for me to realize there was another group, a separate one, where they planned the real details without me. How did I find out? My grandkids, innocently, slipped up. "We already talked about that in the other group, Grandma." Another group. Without me, my chest ached. It was like being pushed away from a table I had set myself. That's how exclusion shows up in families. Not always through harsh words. Sometimes it's in the silence, in the message left unanswered, in the t-shirt that's never made, in the conversation you were never part of. And each absence stings. Small, but cumulative. I kept telling myself, it's just in your head. They love you. It'll be fine. But deep down, I knew something. When I think about the cruise today, I realize it wasn't the first time I had been left out. It was only the most visible one, the most undeniable. Before that, there had already been signs, small ones, almost invisible, but together, they painted a painful picture. A mother slowly shifting from the center of the family to just a peripheral detail. I remember Lucas's 8th birthday. The party was at Tanya's house. My daughter-in-law blew balloons, a table full of candy, a superhero cake. When I arrived, everyone was already taking pictures, families posing in front of the cake. First, the picture of the four, my daughter, her husband, and the boys. Then, the Monroe family photo, which, ironically, was just the same four again. I waited for someone to call me over. Number 1 did. In the end, I asked, and the photo with Grandma. My daughter answered, "Oh Mom, we already took so many, we'll do it later." But later never came. That day, I realized memories were being recorded without me. There was, also, a Mother's Day. I thought we would have lunch together. I waited at home until noon. When I finally called, my daughter said, "Oh Mom, we went to lunch with Nathan's family. I thought you might be busy." I hung up quickly, inventing an excuse so she wouldn't hear me cry. On the table, my food grew cold. That afternoon, I stared at the photo they posted on Instagram. Everyone smiling, glasses raised. The caption read, "Mother's Day with the family." With the family, but not with me. And of course, there was that Christmas. Everyone had agreed to wear red sweaters. I didn't know. I showed up in a blue dress James always loved. That dress. In the family photo, I looked like a smudge out of place. I smiled, but inside I felt like a mistake. The following New Year's, they went to the beach. I wasn't invited. I only found out because a neighbor saw the photos online. My daughter never mentioned the trip. I spent New Year's Eve at home, with a cheap glass of sparkling wine. I looked up at the fireworks in the sky and told myself, next year will be different. Next year we'll be with them. But it wasn't. It's not the noise that hurts. It's the silence. It's not the slap that leaves the mark. It's the absence of the hug. And little by little, I began to learn that my presence was treated as optional, convenient when needed, disposable when not. Being a mother means spending your whole life putting others first. You get used to taking the smaller portion, waiting for the last chair, standing at the end of the line. But there comes a point when last turns into none. And by the time I realized that it was too late, I had already paid for a cruise where there would be no seat for me. The little exclusions had only been rehearsals. The cruise would be the main act, and I was about to see my name officially erased from a dream I had built with my own hands. The warning came without fanfare, just as life-changing things often do. A simple notification on my computer screen. Itinerary confirmed. Caribbean Cruise 2023. It was the kind of email I had been waiting for weeks. I sat down in front of the screen with a mix of anxiety and pride. After all, I had organized everything, paid every cent, chosen every detail. I clicked the link with trembling hands. The page loaded slowly, as if aware of the weight it carried. First came the technical details, dates, boarding times, cabin numbers, then the passenger list. As I scanned the names, I felt like a schoolgirl waiting to hear her name called during roll. 1, 2, 3, 4. There they were, my daughter, my son-in-law, my 2 grandsons. And then nothing. The list ended there. For a moment, I thought, it must be a mistake. I scrolled down, then back up, as if my name might be hiding somewhere. I hit CTRLF and typed Marilyn. Nothing. My hands began to sweat. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. It was as if my whole body was screaming, "No, this can't be real." I opened another email, the one from the travel agency. I read every line, every paragraph. The charges all withdrawn from my account. The reservations all made with my card. I closed my eyes and whispered, there must be some mistake. I stood, went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, came back, looked again. There was no mistake. And the pain wasn't shock, it was confirmation. Because, deep down, I already knew. the silences in the WhatsApp group, the matching shirts without me, the invitations that never came. It all pointed to this moment. But seeing my name absent, in black and white, was like receiving a certificate. You don't belong. I remembered being in school when I wasn't picked for the volleyball team. One by one, the other girls were called. My name never came. I went home pretending I didn't care, but I cried in secret. Now, decades later, the feeling was the same. The excluded girl, but this time, with wrinkles and gray hair. Life can be cruel in the way it repeats itself. You think you've outgrown certain wounds, but they return, dressed in new faces, new settings. The difference was that now, the rejection came from my own daughter. I closed the laptop slowly, as if shutting it could erase what was written. I just sat there, staring at the wall, listening to nothing but my own silence. And in that instant, I realized, the cruise I had dreamed of was theirs. Mine was only the bill that paid for it, but there was one thing they had forgotten, that in the contract. At the bank, on the travel agency's letterhead, one line stood out: primary reservation holder, Marilyn Rose Monroe. And that meant that even if my name wasn't on the passenger list, it was still the name holding up the entire ship. Night fell heavy that Wednesday. The world outside carried on, the same cars passing, dogs barking, distant voices, but inside my house, there was a different silence. Not the absence of sound, but a silence so thick it pressed against my chest. I had shut the laptop earlier, yet the image of the list was still burned into my eyes. 4 names, only 4, not mine. I walked into the kitchen and set water to boil. It was almost automatic when I don't know what else to do. I make tea. I chose mint. The familiar, fresh smell began to spread. As the kettle hissed, I opened the drawer and saw, tucked in the corner, a forgotten packet of the imported tea. I used to love the one I had stopped buying to save money. I ran my fingers over the colorful paper and felt a pang in my chest. I gave this up for them, but they had given me up. I sat at the table with the steaming cup and looked around. The suitcase stood ready in the corner, red ribbons tied to the handle. The anchor keychains still lay scattered across the table. James's photo smiled from the shelf, as if nothing could hurt. Every object mocked me. You prepared everything, and still you won't go. That's when something lit inside me. A simple thought, almost a whisper. But the ship still depends on me. I went back to the laptop, opened the travel agency's email, and confirmed it. Reservation holder, Marilyn Rose Monroe, primary card, ending in 4821. Every payment tied to me, every access dependent on my approval. I opened the banking app, scrolled to the section, linked card management. 6 cards appeared issued to cover cruise expenses, cabin meals, excursions, extras. Beneath each one, a blue button, activate, deactivate, and a small line beneath. All changes can only be made by the primary account holder. My hands trembled. One click, and everything would stop. For long minutes, I just stared at the button. My heart raced. My mind split in two. One voice said, "Don't do it. The children aren't to blame." Another answered, "This isn't cruelty. This is truth. This is reminding them you are not invisible." I remembered James once, when we'd been cheated by a neighbor on a repair job. I wanted to storm over, shouting, demanding answers. James took my hand and said, "Sometimes silence is the loudest answer." Back then, I didn't understand. Now, I did. I stood, took a red pen, and circled the cruise date on the calendar stuck to the fridge. Beneath the circle, I wrote just one word: decision. They thought it would be just the day of boarding. For me, it would be the day of reckoning. I didn't want revenge. I wanted dignity. I wanted to turn every sacrifice I had made into something that mattered, not a humiliation. They could laugh in photos, exclude me from groups, call me only when money was needed, but they would not board without me. I looked at the cup of tea, already cold, set it aside, reopened the app, let my finger hover over the blue button. I didn't click. Not yet. Because lessons have the most weight when delivered at the right time, and the right time would be at the port, with the suitcases ready, the children excited, their confidence written on their faces, just before everything came crashing down. The day broke clear. The sky was bright and spotless, as if made to order for the perfect trip. It was as though even nature conspired to make them believe everything was fine. I woke up early, not because I had to, but because anxiety would not let me sleep. I made coffee, dropped bread in the toaster, sliced an apple, all in silence. On the table, the suitcase still sat in the corner, intact. It would not go with me. I picked up my phone and opened Instagram. It didn't take long to see the first photo. My daughter, smiling in the car. The boys in the back seat, restless with excitement. Nathan, my son-in-law, flashing a peace sign with his fingers. The caption read, "Off to paradise. Family is everything. Family is everything. Except me." While they laughed in the back of an Uber on the way to the port, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee. Its bitterness matched the taste in my mouth. With each update on social media, I saw the spectacle of exclusion play out in real time. Luggage check-in, a smiling selfie in front of the cruise terminal sign, the children jumping with excitement, all without me. The phone buzzed. It was Nathan. Did I answer? No. I let it ring. Seconds later came a message. "Hey, there's an error with check-in. Can you take a look at the banking app? Must be something simple." I turned the phone face down, breathed, waited. 5 minutes later, another call, then another, and another. The messages started piling up. "Mom, the card didn't go through. Can you unlock it? We need to confirm the cabin nothing's working. Please, Mom. The boys are excited. Just check it for us." Each sentence was rehearsed to drag me back into my role as the bank. But I wasn't the bank anymore. I was silence. And for the first time in years, my silence spoke louder than all my words. I remembered James telling me once, "Sometimes, people need to feel the emptiness of your absence." That was exactly what I was doing, letting them feel the void of what they had always taken for granted. My effort, my money, my presence. More messages came, now in audio. My daughter's voice, strained, nervous. "Mom, please, I don't know what you did, but fix it now. The kids are asking. Don't do this to them." She didn't say don't do this to us. She said don't do this to them, as if the responsibility were mine and not hers, the one who had erased me. While I listened without opening, I thought of every sacrifice I had made, every cheap tea bag, every mended dress, every extra tutoring class at night, all to provide that moment they were now enjoying without me, until I decided they wouldn't anymore. I glanced at the clock on the wall. A little over an hour until departure. I pictured the scene at the port, staff asking for another card, Nathan sweating, trying to argue, my daughter embarrassed, forcing a smile for the boys, the children confused, not understanding why they weren't boarding. It hurt to imagine them like that, but it was necessary, because I wasn't just the forgotten passenger. I was the ticket holder. The phone buzzed again. This time, the message was short, typed in a rush, almost like a whisper. "Mom, we can't board. Please, unlock the account." I smiled to myself, not out of revenge, but because, at last, they were learning something they had ignored for years. Without me, nothing holds. The phone wouldn't stop vibrating. It was like an artificial heart on the table, pulsing, trembling, flashing. Each time the screen lit up, the same names appeared. My daughter, then my son-in-law, then her again. 50 calls in less than an hour. I opened just one, out of curiosity. Her voice cracked, caught between irritation and tears. "Mom, we can't board. The card won't go through. They say the reservation is blocked. Please, do something. The kids keep asking why we can't get in. Don't do this to them, Mom, please." I stopped the audio halfway through. My heart tightened, but not from guilt. It tightened with recognition. Recognition that, finally, she was living the consequence of her own choice. More messages followed. "Mom, pick up. If this is some mistake, fix it now. You always took care of us. Stop now. Please, just unlock it. We'll talk later." I noticed the pattern. There were no apologies, no acknowledgement of exclusion, only demands, only the rush to push me back into the role of bunk. While they panicked at the port, I carried out my own quiet ritual. I calmly washed the breakfast dishes, hung the tablecloth on the line, sliced bread to freeze. Every task was simple, but each carried a new taste, the taste of finally choosing myself. I remembered a birthday years ago. I had waited all day for her call. The phone never rang. That night, she sent a short message. "Sorry, Mom, it was a busy day. Happy belated." I cried, alone. Now, I realized maybe that absence had been the first rehearsal for the silence I was learning to master. The son-in-law's messages were sharper. I don't know what you did, but fix it. This is irresponsible. You're ruining the kids' trip. I read them and felt a chill down my spine, not because they hurt me, but because they revealed the truth. They had never seen me as a person. I was a function, and functions don't deserve respect. Curiously, instead of nerves, I felt peace. My body relaxed in a way it hadn't in years. Shoulders dropped, breath deepened. It was as if each missed call was really a reminder. You finally took the wheel. I didn't answer. I didn't type a reply. I didn't record a single audio. And yet, my absence spoke louder than any speech, because deep down, they knew the truth. They knew they had erased me. And now, they were living in the emptiness that choice created. Life has its ironies. I had spent years trying to be heard, and in the end, it was my silence that screamed for me. The phone buzzed one last time, a short message, almost resigned. I guess we missed boarding. I don't know why you did this, but I hope you're happy. I smiled. Not out of revenge, but because, for the first time in a long time, I truly was. The morning passed like a calm river. Outside, the sun was shining, indifferent to the drama unfolding at the port. Inside, my phone lay silent on the table. The calls had stopped. What remained was peace. It was close to noon when I heard the sound. A discreet ping. I picked up the phone. Deposit received, $1,250, International Cruise Line. I blinked, surprised, swiped the screen. Another notification appeared. Deposit received, $1,750, International Cruise Line. And then another, and another, and another. Each notification felt like a drop of rain in the desert. One by one, the amounts trickled in. The money that had drained from me was coming back. The jar, now invisible, reopened before me. Not with coins and folded bills, but with blue numbers glowing on the screen. And with every deposit, I felt a piece of myself return as well. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it represented. Years of sacrifice. Years of being treated as a resource. And now, all of it was falling back into my hands. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. It was balance. I remembered the first time I filled the jar. The pride I felt seeing the glass heavy, overflowing with coins. Now, the bank screen gave me the same sensation. I had taken back ownership of my own dream. Strangely, I didn't feel anger. There was no room for bitterness. There was only a lightness, as if I had set down a suitcase I had carried for years. It felt like breathing deeply after being underwater, like opening a window in a long-closed room. I glanced at the suitcase leaning in the corner, still packed. The clothes, the keychains, the blue scarf. I thought, maybe I'll still travel, maybe not to where they were going, but to where I choose. The difference now was clear. I would have a choice. That as the phone kept pinging with another deposit, I understood something that would change the ending of my story. I no longer needed them to fulfill the dream. The sea was still out there, and this time, I would decide who boarded with me. The money had returned, the messages had stopped, and the silence finally was mine. But the ocean was still calling. That same week, I went to a church gathering. While serving coffee in the fellowship hall, I overheard two friends talking. Francis said, "I've always wanted to travel, but there was never enough money." Carol replied, "Me too. It just feels like those things aren't meant for people like us." I smiled quietly. Hearing them, I felt the invisible jar inside me rattle once more. That night, back home, I picked up my phone and typed, "What would you think of a surprise? I've got extra spots on a cruise." The replies came in disbelief. "You're joking, Marilyn. A cruise, with us? Never thought it could happen." I answered simply, "You deserve it. We're going together." 2 weeks later, there we were, Francis, Carol, Beverly, Nora, and me. 5 women life had overlooked, but who, in that moment, were seen again. At the port, we held hands. Our luggage was modest, but our eyes sparkled like diamonds. The ship towered before us, immense and dazzling. And this time, I wasn't in the background. I was at the center. On the first night aboard, we gathered on the deck. The wind was strong, carrying the sharp scent of salt. The city lights faded into the horizon. I opened my bag, pulled out James's photo, and placed it on the table. The others fell silent. I lit a small lavender candle I had brought with me. This was our dream. I said softly, but I've learned dreams can be shared with those who truly see you. We toasted with cheap champagne, but the joy was priceless. In the days that followed, we laughed until our stomachs hurt. We watched shows, walked the deck at sunrise, took pictures together, every single one of us included. No one was left out. In Carol's laughter, in Francis's stories, in Beverly's spontaneous dancing, I felt something come alive inside me again. This wasn't just a trip, it was healing. I had spent years trying to be remembered by my own family. And in the end, I realized something. Family can also be chosen. Family is the one who invites you into the picture. Family is the one who pulls up a chair for you. Family is the one who delights in sharing the dream, not keeping it for themselves. On the final night, I walked alone to the edge of the ship. The ocean stretched, endless, dark, mysterious. The wind whipped through my gray hair. I held James's photo close and whispered, "I did it, my love." Not with the ones I thought, but with the ones who truly wanted me by their side. And for the first time in years, I felt no pain. I felt peace. When I returned to the cabin, the women were laughing, playing cards, sipping wine. I sat with them and thought. They said there was no place for me, so I created my own place. And in it, there was room for all of us. And you, have you ever felt excluded by your own family? What would you have done in my place? Do you think I was right to freeze the trip, or would you have acted differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss the next ones.